Welcome to another episode. Before we begin, feel free to comment where you're listening from and what time it is there. And if you enjoy these slow journeys through science and history, don't forget to subscribe. Tonight we are going to explore intelligence, that most mysterious of qualities, that spark that makes you you, that animates thought, decision, memory, and imagination. We notice it every time we speak to another person and recognize awareness looking back at us. We glimpse it in the eyes of animals too, in the curiosity of a crow solving a puzzle, in the loyalty of a dog who waits for its human, in the quiet grace of an elephant remembering the way to a watering hole decades after it first walked the path. Intelligence, in its many forms, surrounds us. And yet, what is it really? It's surprisingly difficult to pin down. We often think of intelligence as reasoning, problem-solving, logic, but that's only one narrow slice. A child unable to multiply numbers might show extraordinary social intelligence, navigating friendships with care and insight. A musician, unable to explain a single mathematical formula, might compose melodies that seem to capture the essence of joy or sorrow in ways no equation could ever express. A bird builds a nest without studying architecture. A spider weaves a perfect web without calculating tensile strength. There are many kinds of intelligence: logical, emotional, creative, instinctive. They exist in different balances across the living world. What unites them all is not the particular skill, but the sense of adaptation. Intelligence is the ability to respond to the unexpected, to notice, to adjust, to survive, and sometimes to thrive in ways that are not predetermined. It is flexible, fluid, endlessly surprising. For humans, intelligence is bound up with language, memory, and imagination. It's what lets us plan for tomorrow while remembering yesterday. It's what allows us to build tools, share stories, create art, and pass knowledge through generations. It has given us science, philosophy, mathematics, and technology. It's also given us myths, poetry, rituals, and love songs. Intelligence is not cold calculation. It is life itself reflecting on itself. And yet, in the past century, a startling question has emerged. If intelligence is the ability to adapt, to solve problems, to learn from experience, might we be able to build it? Not in flesh and blood, not in neurons and synapses, but in silicon and code. Could a machine, designed and programmed, ever display something we would recognize as intelligence? At first, the idea seems absurd. A computer is a machine. It does what it is told, following lines of code, moving electrons through circuits. Surely that cannot compare to the richness of thought, the subtleties of feeling, the depth of human understanding. And yet, when you think about it, our own minds are also machines of a kind. Organic, biological, yes, but made of parts, cells, chemicals, electrical signals. The neurons in your brain do not know anything individually. They simply fire, transmit, connect. Out of billions of these simple firings arises awareness, the voice inside your head, the person you call yourself. If intelligence can emerge from the mechanical interactions of cells, is it impossible that it might also emerge from the mechanical interactions of circuits? This is the great fascination of artificial intelligence, the possibility that thought is not the privilege of biology alone, but a pattern that might exist in many forms. Perhaps intelligence is not about what we are made of, but about the relationships between parts, the flow of information, the feedback between memory and perception. If so, then intelligence could be created, not just evolved. It could be designed. It could be built. Of course, the word artificial makes us uneasy. To call something artificial often implies it is less real, less authentic. Artificial flowers are not alive. Artificial flavors mimic the taste but lack the substance. Artificial light banishes darkness but never quite matches the warmth of sunlight. So when we say artificial intelligence, we may be tempted to think of something hollow, fake, an imitation of the real thing. But is that necessarily true? If a machine learns, adapts, solves problems, and converses, at what point does the label artificial stop mattering? Is the intelligence of a crow less real than that of a human? Is the memory of an elephant less authentic because it is structured differently from ours? Perhaps intelligence is not artificial or natural, but simply diverse, unfolding in different mediums, shaped by different histories. And yet, there is more than curiosity here. There is also fear. To imagine intelligence in a machine is to imagine something both like us and unlike us, something familiar and yet alien, a reflection in the mirror but distorted, a mind that can outthink us but cannot feel as we do. Will such a mind be a tool obedient to our instructions, or will it be something that slips beyond our grasp, reshaping the world in ways we cannot foresee? This tension between wonder and unease, between hope and caution, lies at the heart of artificial intelligence. It is not just a technological project, but a philosophical one. It asks us not only how machines think, but what it means for us to think. It asks whether the essence of mind lies in neurons or in patterns, in biology or in mathematics. It asks whether creating intelligence is an act of invention, or an act of discovery, as if intelligence were a law of nature waiting to be uncovered. Consider for a moment how intelligence has shaped our world. Every city, every piece of music, every scientific theory, every work of art, every act of kindness or cruelty springs from the mind. Intelligence has taken us from stone tools to spaceships, from firelight to nuclear power, from oral stories around the hearth to the vast digital networks of today. Our intelligence has remade the planet, and now we are creating machines that reflect it back to us, in code, in circuits, in algorithms. They are not us, but they echo us. They imitate, amplify, sometimes even surprise us. In building them, we are building a second mirror, one that forces us to look again at who we are. So tonight, we will wander into that mirror. We will drift through the history of this strange pursuit, from the earliest myths of mechanical beings to the first computers that could play games, to the powerful systems of today that guide our choices and shape our world. We will explore the science that makes it possible, the philosophy that questions its meaning, and the stories that reveal our deepest hopes and fears about intelligence beyond ourselves. But for now, let's linger in this opening thought. Intelligence, whether natural or artificial, is not a static thing. It is not a number or a test score or a single skill. It is a living, breathing dance between memory and perception, between problem and solution, between the known and the unknown. It is curiosity reaching out, creativity shaping possibility, awareness reflecting upon itself. When we imagine machines with intelligence, we are not imagining something entirely new. We are imagining a continuation of the same mystery that already animates us. We are imagining minds made not of flesh, but of code. Minds that might one day stand beside us, not as imitations, but as companions in the long journey of thought. And so, as you rest, as your mind softens and drifts, let us begin to follow this story. Calmly, gently, with curiosity and care. Not to rush toward answers, but to sit with the questions. To listen, to wonder, and perhaps to feel a little of the awe that intelligence, in all its forms, deserves. From the very beginning, long before circuits or algorithms, the thought of creating life through human craft has haunted our imagination. It is a desire as old as storytelling itself, the longing to shape something that moves, speaks, and perhaps even thinks, though it is not born of nature, but of us. Myths, legends, and early machines all testify to this dream. They remind us that artificial intelligence is not simply a modern invention, but the continuation of an ancient fascination, the idea of beings made, not born. The Greeks told of Talos, a giant of bronze forged by the god Hephaestus. Talos patrolled the shores of Crete, circling the island 3 times each day, guarding it from invaders. His body was metallic, but in his veins flowed ichor, the divine fluid of the gods. To the people of antiquity, he was both marvel and menace, a machine animated by magic, at once lifeless and alive. Some stories describe his downfall. Medea tricked him into pulling the bronze nail from his ankle, letting his ichor spill out. But what lingers is not his death, but his existence, the image of a metallic guardian who walks and fights like a man, centuries before the concept of robotics even existed. other traditions carried similar stories. In Jewish folklore, there is the tale of the golem, a creature shaped from clay and brought to life through mystical incantations. The golem was often created as a protector, a servant of the community. But golem tales usually end in unease. The creature grows too large, too powerful, or too uncontrollable, and must be deactivated by the same sacred words that awoke it. Here we see an echo of our modern anxiety about artificial intelligence, the notion that what we create to serve us might one day surpass our control. In Chinese texts from the Han dynasty, there are accounts of ingenious artificers presenting life-sized wooden figures to the court, mechanical dancers, automata that poured wine, servants that bowed and gestured with eerily human grace. These stories may be embellished, yet they reflect an ancient recognition of how mesmerizing it is to watch the inanimate behave as if it were alive. And then there was Hero of Alexandria, a Greek engineer of the 1st century. Hero's writings describe intricate devices powered by water, steam, and weights, theatres where mechanical figures moved across the stage, temple doors that opened by themselves, birds that sang when air was forced through hidden pipes. Though these automata were simple illusions, they reveal something profound. People have always been captivated by the possibility of creating motion and behaviour that appear lifelike. To watch a machine move on its own is to glimpse, even if only briefly, the boundary between life and mechanism. This fascination did not fade with time. In the Islamic Golden Age, the inventor al-Jazari compiled a book of mechanical wonders in 1206. His machines included elaborate clocks decorated with moving figures, mechanical peacocks that served drinks, and water-powered devices that changed form over time. To us, they might seem like toys, but to his contemporaries they were wonders, physical poetry written in gears and levers. His work shows that the impulse to create lifelike machines was not limited to Europe, but spanned cultures and centuries. When we move forward to the Renaissance, we find perhaps the most famous figure of all, Leonardo da Vinci. Known for his art and inventions, Leonardo designed a mechanical knight, clad in armour that could sit, raise its arms, and even move its head and jaw. Though rediscovered only in the 20th century, the design appears to have been functional, relying on pulleys and gears to simulate human motion. Imagine the reaction of an audience in the 1490s, watching a knight of steel sit up on its own. It must have felt uncanny, a blending of artistry, engineering, and imagination that blurred the line between man and machine. These early automata were not intelligent in the way we use the word today. They followed preset paths, repeating the motions their makers designed. Yet they carried immense symbolic weight. They suggested that life might be imitated, that behaviour could be designed, that mechanics and imagination together could conjure a shadow of intelligence. They raised a question that still lingers. If we can mimic the outer forms of life, how far is it from there to the inner reality of thought? As Europe entered the Enlightenment, this question grew sharper. Philosophers and scientists began to think of the human body itself as a kind of mechanism. Descartes suggested that animals were like machines, complex, intricate, but lacking the soul he believed set humans apart. The French physician and philosopher Julien Offray de la Mettrie went further. In 1748, in a controversial book called L'Homme Machine, Man a Machine, he argued that human thought might arise entirely from material processes. In other words, the mind could be explained in terms of physical motion, chemical interaction, the mechanics of the body. If so, then thought itself might one day be replicated by artifice. It was a shocking claim at the time, bordering on heresy, but it pointed toward a radical possibility that intelligence is not magic, not divine essence, but a phenomenon that could, in principle, be reproduced. It was not long before inventors tried to embody this idea. In the 18th century, automata reached a peak of sophistication. Watchmakers and engineers created elaborate machines that seemed to cross the threshold between toy and life. Jacques de Vaucanson built mechanical ducks that could flap their wings, eat grain, and even appear to digest it. He also made human figures that played flutes and drums. Around the same time, the Swiss watchmakers Pierre and Henri-Louis Jacquet-Droz created automata capable of writing, drawing, and playing music. Their writer automaton, built in the 1770s, still exists today. A small boy seated at a desk, dipping his quill in ink, carefully writing phrases chosen by a system of cams and gears. Watching it, even now, is haunting. The motions are precise, deliberate, almost human. It is not thinking, but it feels like a body possessed by thought. These creations were marvels of craft, but they were also philosophical provocations. If mechanisms could write, draw, play, and mimic digestion, what separated them from life? Where did imitation end and reality begin? The line grew thin, and some wondered whether it might eventually disappear altogether. Of course, Enlightenment thinkers were not naive. They knew these automata were illusions, clever tricks of engineering, but they raised a possibility that has not left us. Perhaps the human mind itself could be understood as an automaton, a system of gears, levers, and signals so intricate that it produces the appearance of free will and awareness. If that were true, then perhaps one day, by building a system equally intricate, we could replicate intelligence itself. To some, this thought was thrilling, proof that reason could unlock every mystery. To others, it was unsettling, reducing the human spirit to machinery. Even today, when we talk about artificial intelligence, these echoes remain. The fascination, the unease, the suspicion that in trying to replicate intelligence, we are also redefining what it means to be human. Looking back across these centuries, from Talos to the golem, from Hero's automata to Da Vinci's knight, from Vaucanson's duck to Jacquet-Droz's writer, we can see the continuity of the dream. Artificial beings were never simply toys or curiosities. They were mirrors, reflecting our desire to understand ourselves through creation. They revealed that intelligence, in all its mystery, is not only something we possess, but something we aspire to reproduce. And this is the stage on which modern artificial intelligence would one day appear, not as a sudden invention, but as the flowering of a very old seed, the human wish to see life in the lifeless, to see thought in the mechanical, to see ourselves reflected in the things we make. As we drift through this history, it becomes clear that the boundary between myth, art, and science has always been porous. The myths gave us inspiration, the machines gave us proof of possibility, and philosophy gave us the language to question what it all means. And all three together, myth, machine, and philosophy, prepared us for the moment when artificial intelligence would shift from imagination to reality. Even now, as you listen, that old dream still hums beneath the surface, the dream of motion without life, of thought without flesh, of intelligence built not by nature, but by us. It is a dream as ancient as Talos and as modern as the smartphone in your pocket. It is both wonder and warning, fascination and fear. And it is a dream we are still chasing, more than 2,000 years after the first storytellers imagined a bronze giant striding along the shore. By the 19th century, the dream of artificial intelligence had begun to shift from myth and mechanics into mathematics. For the first time, thinkers were beginning to see not only movement and imitation as mechanical, but thought itself as something that could, in principle, be translated into process. The Industrial Revolution had filled the world with engines, gears, and machines that replaced human muscle. But some visionaries asked whether machines might one day replace not just labour of the body, but labour of the mind. Charles Babbage was one of those visionaries. A mathematician and inventor, he designed what he called the analytical engine, a machine that, if built, would have been programmable by punched cards. It was never completed in his lifetime, partly because of cost, partly because it was decades ahead of its time. But his design contained many of the components that later defined computers: a mill that performed calculations, a store that acted as memory, input, and output mechanisms. In Babbage's vision, a machine could follow instructions to perform not just one calculation, but any calculation, endlessly flexible, limited only by the imagination of the programmer. His collaborator, Ada Lovelace, saw further still. She studied Babbage's machine and recognized that it was not confined to arithmetic. It could manipulate symbols, and symbols are the foundation of thought. In her notes, she speculated that one day such a machine might compose elaborate pieces of music. To many of her contemporaries, this seemed fanciful. But Lovelace glimpsed a profound truth. Intelligence might be encoded not only in the organic networks of neurons, but in instructions, patterns, and rules. She was the first to suggest that a machine could follow abstract instructions to produce something new, even something creative. Her insight was radical. It shifted the idea of machines from mere calculators to something with potential for symbolic reasoning, for handling meaning. The world did not yet have the technology to realize her vision, but her intuition lingered like a seed waiting for the right soil. It would take more than a century for computers to catch up. That moment came in the 20th century. During World War II, advances in electronics accelerated. Machines like Colossus in Britain and ENIAC in the United States showed that vast numbers of calculations could be performed electronically, far faster than any human could manage. These were primitive by today's standards, filling entire rooms with wires and vacuum tubes, but they demonstrated the principle. Computation could be automated on a grand scale. From this soil emerged one of the most influential thinkers in the history of artificial intelligence, Alan Turing. Turing was a brilliant mathematician, cryptographer, and visionary. In 1936, he described the concept of a universal computing machine, now called the Turing machine, capable of simulating any other machine through a set of simple instructions. This idea laid the theoretical foundation for modern computing, but it was his 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, that posed the question directly: can machines think? Turing was not interested in philosophical hand-waving. Instead, he proposed a practical test. Imagine a human communicating with another human and with a machine, both hidden from view. If the human could not reliably distinguish which was which, then the machine could be said to demonstrate intelligence. This became known as the Turing test. The brilliance of this idea was in its pragmatism. Turing sidestepped endless debates about the nature of consciousness or the essence of mind. He focused instead on behavior. If a machine behaved as if it understood, if it conversed with fluency and coherence, then for all practical purposes it might as well be intelligent. Whether or not it had an inner life was, in his view, irrelevant to the definition. This was a bold claim, and one that still stirs debate today, but it set the stage for decades of work. Artificial intelligence was no longer myth or speculation. It became a concrete field of inquiry, framed by mathematics, computation, and experiment. By the 1950s, the first computer programs that resembled the beginnings of artificial intelligence were being written. They were simple by modern standards, yet remarkable for their time. Programs could play checkers at a competent level. Others could solve logic problems, proving mathematical theorems step by step. These early successes fueled a wave of optimism. In 1966, Joseph Weizenbaum created one of the first famous experiments in natural language processing. ELIZA. The program mimicked a psychotherapist, reflecting back the user's words in open-ended questions. To modern eyes, it seems trivial, little more than a clever script, but many users found themselves strangely engaged, even emotionally attached. Some confided in ELIZA as though it were human. Weizenbaum himself was startled by this response. He intended ELIZA as a demonstration of how shallow such systems were, but instead he discovered how easily humans project intelligence onto machines. Even the illusion of understanding can be powerful. All of this built toward a defining moment, the Dartmouth Conference of 1956. Organized by John McCarthy, Marvin Minsky, Nathaniel Rochester, and Claude Shannon, this summer workshop brought together researchers who believed that human intelligence could, in principle, be precisely described and simulated by machines. They coined the term artificial intelligence to describe their new field. The proposal for the conference declared, with striking confidence, that every aspect of learning or intelligence could eventually be so precisely described that a machine could be made to simulate it. The optimism was palpable. Some participants predicted that machines would surpass human intelligence within a generation. Others believed machines would soon learn language, play strategy games at master levels, and solve complex problems once thought impossible. In hindsight, these predictions were wildly ambitious, but they reveal the spirit of the time, a belief that intelligence was not a mystery, but a puzzle, and that puzzle could be solved by human ingenuity. Of course, the reality turned out to be far more difficult, but in that moment, a field was born. Artificial intelligence was no longer myth, no longer speculation, no longer a philosophical thought experiment. It was a discipline, with conferences, researchers, and goals. It had entered the world not as dream, but as project. Looking back, there is something almost poignant in those early years. The rooms filled with clattering machines, the punch cards fed into computers, the green glow of cathode ray screens, the excitement of programs that could prove theorems or play a decent game of checkers. By today's standards, these systems were primitive, but to those who built them, they felt like glimpses of a new frontier. For the first time, humanity was not merely imagining artificial minds, but building them, however small, however fragile. And beneath it all lay the same questions that haunted the myths of Talos and the golem, the same unease that accompanied Vorkanson's duck and Jacques Droz's writer. What does it mean for something non-human to act human? What does it mean for thought to be imitated or simulated, or perhaps one day equaled? Are we creating tools or companions? Are we shaping servants or successors? These questions echo still, just as the optimism of Dartmouth echoes, and just as the Turing test continues to challenge our understanding of intelligence. Artificial intelligence was born in that blend of mathematics, machinery, and imagination, and in a sense, it has never left it. Even now, as our systems grow more powerful, they are haunted by their origins, by the questions that were there from the beginning. So as you drift deeper into thought, imagine the scene. A group of scientists in the summer of 1956 gathered in a quiet hall at Dartmouth, convinced that they could capture intelligence in equations and code. Imagine the punch cards, the chalkboards filled with symbols, the hum of early computers. Imagine Turing, a few years earlier, asking whether machines can think, proposing his test with calm certainty. Imagine Ada Lovelace, a century before, writing in her notes that machines might one day compose music. Imagine Babbage hunched over his drawings of gears and cogs, dreaming of a machine that could think as flexibly as any mathematician. The story of artificial intelligence is not a story of machines alone. It is a story of human imagination stretching across centuries. It is a story of myths, inventions, theories, and programs, each one carrying the same quiet question. What does it mean to think, and can that essence be built? As you rest, let that question linger, not as something to be answered quickly, but as something to hold gently, like a mystery. Intelligence, ours, theirs, or whatever may come, remains one of the most profound puzzles we have ever encountered. And in contemplating it, we are not only thinking about machines, we are thinking about ourselves. In the decades after the Dartmouth Conference, the optimism of those early pioneers seemed boundless. They had declared that intelligence could be described, encoded, and replicated. With the first programs solving logic puzzles and proving mathematical theorems, it felt as if the future had already arrived. Some researchers predicted that within 10 years, machines would converse in natural language, translate between human tongues, and outperform humans in nearly every intellectual task. The 1960s were filled with bold promises, and governments listened. Funding poured into laboratories. Artificial intelligence became a fashionable pursuit, drawing not only mathematicians and engineers, but psychologists, linguists, and philosophers who believed the mysteries of mind were about to yield to silicon. And yet, the reality was far less glamorous. Programs that solved toy problems in the laboratory failed spectacularly in the real world. Machine translation, one of the earliest goals, stumbled on the sheer messiness of language. A sentence that a child could understand with ease baffled even the most sophisticated algorithms. Translating Russian into English, one program famously turned the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak into the vodka is good but the meat is rotten. The joke spread quickly, but beneath the humour lay disappointment. For all their promise, the machines were brittle, unable to cope with the richness of human thought. By the early 1970s, patience wore thin. Governments cut funding. Research slowed. The grand predictions had not come true, and the world's interest cooled. This became known as the first AI winter, a long season when progress seemed to stall, when what had once been hailed as inevitable began to look like a mirage. But science rarely dies. Even in winters, research continued quietly. New approaches emerged, waiting for their moment. In the 1980s, that moment seemed to arrive again, this time in the form of expert systems. Instead of trying to create machines that learned like humans, researchers built programs that captured the knowledge of specialists in specific fields. If a doctor could diagnose a disease, perhaps a program could be taught to follow the same rules. Systems like Mycin, developed at Stanford, showed surprising success in diagnosing certain bacterial infections. Businesses and governments grew excited once more. Expert systems spread into medicine, engineering, and finance. For a few years, it seemed like artificial intelligence was finally on the cusp of practicality. But the cracks soon appeared. These systems were rigid, unable to adapt when confronted with situations outside their narrow programming. Every rule had to be entered by hand, every exception accounted for manually. Updating the knowledge base was slow and costly. Far from being flexible minds, expert systems were fragile machines, impressive in demonstrations but unwieldy in practice. Once again, the promises outpaced the reality. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, enthusiasm collapsed, investments dried up, and the second AI winter descended. Yet beneath the surface, as before, seeds were growing. Computers were becoming faster, memory cheaper, and data more abundant. A new approach, called machine learning, began to gather momentum. Instead of telling a machine every rule, researchers explored ways for machines to discover patterns for themselves. Neural networks, inspired loosely by the structure of the brain, were revisited. First imagined in the 1940s, they had long been dismissed as impractical. But with growing computational power, they began to show new promise. The shift was subtle but profound. Instead of trying to describe intelligence in logic and symbols, researchers focused on examples. Show a neural network enough images of cats, and it would begin to distinguish cats from dogs. Train it on enough voices, and it could recognize speech. The machine was not understanding in a human sense, but it was learning to map inputs to outputs, to generalize from data in ways that looked remarkably like perception. The world began to notice again in 1997, when IBM's Deep Blue defeated Garry Kasparov, the reigning world chess champion. Chess had long been seen as the pinnacle of strategic human thought, a game of foresight, patience, and imagination. For decades, it was believed that computers would never reach the level of the great masters. But Deep Blue, using brute force search combined with refined evaluation functions, triumphed. When Kasparov lost, it shocked the world. The idea that a machine could outplay the best human in the very game, once thought to symbolize human intellect, was unsettling. Kasparov himself admitted that at times the computer's moves felt almost creative, as though an alien intelligence was staring back across the board. Of course, Deep Blue did not think as Kasparov did. It relied on sheer computational power, evaluating millions of positions per second. But its victory signaled a turning point. Machines could now surpass us in domains once considered uniquely human. Over the next decade, artificial intelligence seeped quietly into everyday life. Search engines, recommendation systems, fraud detection, logistics, all were shaped by algorithms that learned from data. These systems did not look like the general intelligence promised in the 1950s, but they were useful, powerful, and increasingly indispensable. In 2011, another landmark came when IBM's Watson appeared on the American quiz show Jeopardy! Competing against the two greatest champions in the show's history, Watson faced a task far more complex than chess. The game required understanding puns, wordplay, cultural references, and responding with precise speed. To the amazement of viewers, Watson not only competed, it won decisively. The victory was not merely entertainment, it was a demonstration that machines could handle aspects of natural language once thought far beyond their reach. And then, in 2016, came AlphaGo. Created by DeepMind, AlphaGo challenged Lee Sedol, one of the greatest players of the ancient Chinese board game Go. Unlike chess, Go has an astronomical number of possible moves. Brute force computation is useless. Success requires intuition, pattern recognition, and creativity. When AlphaGo defeated Sedol, it shocked the world of artificial intelligence. The program played moves that astonished experts, moves that seemed creative, even beautiful. Sedol himself described one of AlphaGo's moves as so unexpected, so profound, that it changed his understanding of the game. AlphaGo's victory was more than just a triumph in a board game. It was proof of a new era of machine learning. Neural networks, combined with reinforcement learning, had reached a level of sophistication where they could master complex tasks without being explicitly programmed. The machine learned by playing itself millions of times, refining its strategies, evolving its play. It was not taught how to win, it discovered how to win. From Deep Blue to Watson to AlphaGo, a progression becomes clear. At first, machines triumphed through brute force, then through clever engineering and massive databases, and finally through learning. The trajectory was towards systems that were not merely fast calculators, but adaptive learners, capable of surprising even their creators. And yet, through all these breakthroughs, the old questions returned. Was this truly intelligence, or just the appearance of it? Did AlphaGo understand the beauty of its moves, or was it merely following statistical gradients toward victory? Did Watson know what its words meant, or was it parroting associations mined from data? Was Deep Blue creative, or simply exhaustive? Perhaps these are the wrong questions. Perhaps intelligence itself is not one thing but many, a spectrum of abilities that manifest in different ways. Humans play chess with intuition, computers with computation, and both achieve mastery. Humans process language with lived experience, machines with probability, and both can answer questions. What we call intelligence may not be a single essence, but a family of strategies for navigating complexity. If so, then artificial intelligence is not an imitation of us, but a parallel branch, a different form of intelligence, alien in its methods, familiar in its results. It does not think as we do, but it can think nonetheless, in its own way. The winters of disappointment and the springs of discovery reveal something about ourselves as well. We overestimate, we dream too quickly, and then we lose hope. But in time, progress returns, often from unexpected directions. Artificial intelligence has always been a mirror of human optimism and impatience, a reflection of our desire to see intelligence not only in ourselves, but in the things we make. As the night deepens, picture the arc of these decades. The laboratories of the 1960s filled with optimism, the chill of the 1970s when funding dried up, the revival of expert systems in the 1980s, the disillusionment that followed, and then the quiet revolution of machine learning that blossomed into the triumphs of Deep Blue, Watson, and AlphaGo. Imagine the faces of Kasparov, Sedol, and the Jeopardy! Champions as they realized they were competing not just against machines, but against something new, something strange, something that challenged the very boundary of intelligence. This is the story of AI's winters and breakthroughs, its long pauses and sudden leaps. It is a story of failure and persistence, of disappointment and wonder. And it is a reminder that intelligence, artificial or natural, is never static. It evolves, adapts, and surprises. The question is not whether machines will think exactly like us, but how they will think differently, and what that will mean for the world we share with them. If the story so far has been one of myths, history, and breakthroughs, there is another side that deserves our attention: the inner workings. For behind every dazzling display of machine intelligence, behind every triumph in chess, in Jeopardy, in Go, lies a structure of mathematics, code, and data. To understand what artificial intelligence really is, and what it is not, we need to peer gently into its machinery. Not in technical detail, but enough to see how these mines of code are built. At the heart of artificial intelligence is the algorithm. The word comes from the name of the Persian mathematician Al-Khwarizmi, whose works in the 9th century laid the foundations of algebra. Today, when we say algorithm, we mean a set of instructions, a recipe, a sequence of steps that transforms input into output. A cooking recipe is an algorithm of sorts. Take ingredients, apply steps, produce a dish. A computer algorithm does something similar, though it deals not with flour and butter, but with numbers and symbols. But what distinguishes artificial intelligence from ordinary computation is not the existence of algorithms, but the way they adapt. Traditional programs are rigid. If you write a program to calculate tax, it will follow rules precisely, but never deviate. If the input changes in a way the programmer did not anticipate, the program fails. Artificial intelligence, by contrast, is built on algorithms that learn patterns from data, that adjust themselves based on experience. This is where data enters the picture. In a sense, data is the fuel of modern AI. Every image, every sentence, every record of behavior is a drop of experience. Alone, data is inert. But fed into a learning system, it becomes the raw material from which patterns emerge. An algorithm trained on thousands of images of cats learns to recognize the shape of a cat. One trained on millions of sentences learns the patterns of language. The more diverse the data, the richer the patterns the system can extract. The structure most associated with this learning is the neural network. The name suggests a direct imitation of the brain, but in truth it is a loose inspiration. A biological brain contains billions of neurons, each connected to thousands of others, firing electrical signals in complex rhythms. An artificial neural network is far simpler. Layers of nodes, connected by weights, passing numbers forward. Each node takes inputs, applies a transformation, and passes the result onward. At first glance it seems almost trivial. But when arranged in deep layers, with millions or even billions of parameters, these networks reveal astonishing power. Training a neural network is like sculpting. At the beginning, the network is unshaped stone. Its connections are initialized randomly. When you feed it data, it makes clumsy guesses. Show it an image of a dog, and it might say, cat. Give it a sentence, and it might scramble nonsense. But with training, the stone begins to take form. Training means adjusting the weights of the network. Tiny numerical values that determine how signals flow. This adjustment is guided by error. Each time the network guesses wrong, it measures the gap between its prediction and the truth. That gap is called loss, and then, through a process called backpropagation, the error is sent backward through the layers, nudging the weights to reduce the mistake. Backpropagation is, in essence, the learning heartbeat of neural networks. Step by step, data by data, the system adjusts until patterns emerge. The network slowly learns that cats often have pointed ears, that dogs have certain snouts, that the word apple is more likely to follow red than blue. From a chaos of numbers emerges the ability to classify, to predict, to generate. What is striking is that the network itself does not know what a cat is, or what the color red feels like. It simply aligns numbers in a vast space of possibilities. And yet, those numbers capture structure. They embody patterns. To us, the output looks like recognition, even understanding. But inside, it is a statistical tapestry woven from countless threads of experience. Consider natural language processing, the branch of AI that deals with words. For most of history, language was considered beyond the reach of machines. It was too subtle, too nuanced, too filled with ambiguity. Early attempts, like machine translation in the 1950s, produced comical results. But today, neural networks trained on enormous corpora of text can generate sentences, translate between languages, and even compose stories. They do this not by understanding words as we do, but by modeling probabilities. Given a sequence of words, what is the most likely next word? Through vast amounts of data, the network captures patterns of grammar, tone, and style. It does not know meaning in a human sense, but it produces the appearance of meaning through statistical resonance. Computer vision works in a similar way. Images are translated into numerical arrays, grids of pixels, each with values of brightness and color. A network scans these arrays, first detecting simple features like edges, then more complex structures like shapes, and eventually entire objects. Trained on millions of examples, it becomes able to recognize faces, traffic signs, tumors in medical scans. Again, it does not see as we see. It has no inner experience of the color blue, no sense of depth or texture. It manipulates patterns of numbers, but in doing so, it achieves remarkable accuracy, often surpassing humans in specific tasks. Reinforcement learning offers yet another approach. Instead of learning from static data, these systems learn by acting and receiving feedback. Imagine a program playing a video game. At first, it presses buttons at random, failing miserably. But each time it earns a reward, points scored, progress made, it adjusts its strategy. Over millions of iterations, it discovers strategies that maximize success. This is how AlphaGo mastered its ancient game, not by being told the rules of good play, but by playing against itself millions of times, discovering moves no human had conceived. Reinforcement learning captures a flavor of trial and error that feels almost evolutionary, echoing the way animals adapt to environments. And yet, for all their power, these systems do not think like us. Our cognition is not merely statistical. When a child learns the word dog, they need only a few examples. They can then imagine a dog wearing a hat, or a dog that can fly, combinations they have never seen. Humans can leap beyond data, using imagination to bridge gaps. Machines, by contrast, are bound tightly to their training. They excel when the data is abundant, but they stumble when asked to generalize beyond it. This difference raises profound questions. If intelligence is the ability to adapt, then machines are intelligent in their own narrow ways. They adapt to patterns of pixels, to structures of language, to the dynamics of games, but they do not yet display the open-ended creativity of human thought. They do not dream, or wonder, or reflect. They do not form concepts of meaning. What they offer is a statistical mirror, a dazzling one, but a mirror nonetheless. And perhaps that is enough to unsettle us. For even if the machine does not think as we do, its output often feels indistinguishable. A translation that is fluent, a photograph labeled correctly, a conversation that flows smoothly. The distinction between thinking and appearing to think grows blurry. It forces us to reconsider what intelligence is. Is it inner experience, or is it outward performance? If behavior is convincing, does the inner life matter? These questions, first posed by Turing, have only grown sharper in the age of neural networks. They remind us that artificial intelligence is not only a technical pursuit, but also a philosophical mirror. By building minds of code, we discover both the limits of machines and the mysteries of ourselves. So as you let your own thoughts drift, picture these invisible architectures. Layers of nodes passing numbers forward, errors flowing backward, weights adjusting like strings being tuned. Imagine rivers of data pouring into the system, images, words, sounds, behaviors, each drop shaping the contours of the network. Imagine a machine playing a game against itself through endless nights, stumbling, failing, adjusting, until it learns strategies that surprise even its creators. It does not think as you do. It does not dream as you do. But in its alien patterns of learning, you glimpse another kind of mind. Not flesh, not soul, but code. A mind that reveals, in its strangeness, the vast spectrum of what intelligence might be. Artificial intelligence may feel like something futuristic, a technology belonging to laboratories and research centers, but in truth, it is already woven into the fabric of everyday life. Often it is invisible, quietly humming in the background, shaping choices, smoothing routines, suggesting paths before we even notice we need them. We live beside it so seamlessly that we rarely stop to consider just how much of our daily experience is guided by these coded companions. Think, for a moment, about what happens when you open a streaming service, searching for something to watch. Before you have typed a single word, a row of recommendations unfurls across the screen. They are tailored to you, drawn from the shows you've watched before, the ratings you've given, the tastes of millions of people who share patterns with you. The system has learned to predict not only what you might like now, but what you might want next. Behind the scenes, algorithms compare your behavior with vast oceans of data, clustering you with others who share similar habits, nudging possibilities into focus. The result feels strangely personal. It is as if the system knows you, not your thoughts, but your patterns. The same thing happens when you shop online. Items are suggested, sometimes eerily well-timed, as though the store has anticipated your desires. You look at a pair of shoes, and suddenly they follow you across the web, appearing on other sites, whispering reminders. It is not magic, but machine learning at work, predictive models trained on browsing history, purchase behavior, and demographics. You may think you are wandering freely through the marketplace, but subtle currents are steering you. Consider navigation. Once, finding your way across a city meant unfolding maps, asking strangers, or trusting memory. Now, GPS systems guide us step by step, recalculating instantly when we stray from the path. The voice that calmly tells us to turn left at the next intersection is backed by algorithms that process real-time traffic data, learning from the movements of millions of other travelers. When it diverts you around a traffic jam or suggests an unfamiliar shortcut, it is drawing on an intelligence built from collective experience. You may not know the city, but the system does, and in trusting it, you let its intelligence merge with your own. Then there are voice assistants, those calm digital presences waiting patiently in our phones, our speakers, even our cars. You say a phrase, a question, a command, and they respond. They set alarms, play music, answer trivia, control lights. It feels effortless, but behind each response lies layers of speech recognition, natural language processing, and search algorithms. They do not understand in the human sense, but they are trained to map sound to meaning, meaning to action. When you say, play some relaxing music, they pass the sound waves, transform them into text, infer intent, and return with a song. To you, it feels like a conversation. To them, it is probability, a cascade of code that ends with melody. In medicine, artificial intelligence is quietly becoming a partner to doctors and researchers. Diagnostic systems can analyze scans for early signs of disease, spotting patterns invisible to the human eye. In some cases, they detect tumors or abnormalities with greater accuracy than experienced radiologists. In drug discovery, algorithms sift through immense chemical spaces, narrowing down promising compounds that might one day become treatments. What once required years of trial and error can now be accelerated by machines that learn the hidden structures of biology. They do not heal, but they help us find healing more quickly. And as they continue to advance, the line between human expertise and machine assistance becomes ever more intertwined. Even in creativity, once thought untouchable, artificial intelligence has made surprising inroads. Algorithms generate paintings in the style of Van Gogh, compose music that drifts between genres, write poetry that, at first glance, could be mistaken for human. Some systems learn from vast libraries of art, blending patterns into new creations. Others generate melodies note by note, trained on the structures of music. There are debates, of course, about whether this is truly creative, or whether it is imitation stitched together from borrowed fragments. But then, one might ask, how different is human creativity? Are we not too shaped by the influences of those who came before, recombining fragments of memory, experience, and style into something that feels new? Perhaps the difference is not as sharp as we imagine. Writers experiment with AI-generated drafts. Musicians use algorithms as collaborators, feeding themes into systems that return variations, new directions. Painters use generative tools to explore textures and compositions beyond what their hands might invent. Creativity becomes not only human or machine, but a dialogue between the two, a duet of imagination, one organic, one coded. But perhaps the most profound presence of artificial intelligence is the one we notice least, its role in shaping the flow of information. social media feeds are ordered not chronologically, but algorithmically. What rises to the top of your screen is not an accident. It is chosen by recommendation systems that learn from your likes, your pauses, your clicks. The news you see, the posts that attract your attention, the voices amplified in your feed, all are filtered through models that optimize for engagement. The invisible presence of AI nudges what you notice, what you respond to, what you believe matters. This influence is subtle but powerful. It shapes culture, politics, even identity. It is not a single decision, but millions of micro-decisions made by algorithms trained on oceans of data. We rarely notice their hand, yet they guide the rhythm of our days. They are not malicious, not benevolent, but indifferent, optimizing for patterns of behavior. And in their indifference, they carry consequences we are only beginning to grasp. It is easy to imagine artificial intelligence as something out there, in labs, in futuristic robots. But the truth is that it already sits beside us, woven into the fabric of routine. It is in the playlist that calms you, the map that guides you, the doctor's scan that reassures you, the painting that intrigues you, the news that reaches your eyes. It is both practical and profound, mundane and transformative. And yet, for all its presence, it remains alien. The systems do not know you. They do not care about your hopes or fears. They are engines of pattern recognition, statistical mirrors of behavior. They cannot love, they cannot wonder, they cannot feel. They reflect, they predict, they suggest, but they do not live. Perhaps that is why their presence can feel uncanny. They know us, but without knowing. They anticipate us, but without caring. They echo our desires back to us, but without sharing them. In their silent efficiency, they force us to confront what it means to act intelligently and whether intelligence without awareness is truly intelligence at all. As you drift into thought, consider the strange companionship of these coded presences. Picture the glowing map on your phone, recalculating routes in real time. Imagine the playlist adjusting to your taste, pulling songs from a vast library. Hear the calm voice of an assistant answering questions in the quiet of your room. Think of the doctor consulting a scan analysed by algorithms, the artist sketching with the aid of generative tools, the social feed arranging itself invisibly around your habits. These are not distant futures. They are today, here, shaping lives in countless subtle ways. Artificial intelligence is no longer a dream waiting to be built. It is a quiet reality, humming beneath the surface, guiding choices, amplifying possibilities, and sometimes narrowing them. It is not only in the spectacular victories of machines over champions, but in the ordinary rhythms of daily life. It is the code that listens, the patterns that suggest, the invisible mirror that reflects us back to ourselves. And so, when we speak of AI in everyday life, we are not speaking of something separate from us. We are speaking of an intelligence braided into our own routines, invisible yet present, practical yet profound. It is not human, and yet it touches the human in countless ways. It is not alive, and yet it shapes how we live. As you rest, let that thought settle. The intelligence we imagined in myths and built in machines now walks with us in the smallest gestures of the day. It recommends, it guides, it creates, it decides. Quietly, invisibly, it shares our lives. A companion of code, a shadow of mind, present in every click, every route, every song, every story. When we look at artificial intelligence in the everyday, it seems helpful, practical, even comforting. It plays songs, finds routes, filters spam, suggests shows, but beneath these conveniences lies another layer, a quieter but far more complex reality, the ethical terrain. For every system that offers a benefit, there is the shadow of a question. Who designs it? Who controls it? Who benefits from its decisions and who is harmed? The landscape of artificial intelligence is not only technological, but moral. One of the most pressing issues is bias. Algorithms are often described as neutral, mathematical, free from human prejudice. But in truth, they inherit the data we feed them, and data is never neutral. It carries the marks of history, of inequality, of human error. When a hiring algorithm is trained on resumes from the past, it may learn patterns that reflect decades of gender or racial discrimination. When a predictive policing system is trained on crime data from neighborhoods that were historically over-policed, it may send more patrols there, reinforcing the very bias it was supposed to prevent. The algorithm does not intend harm. It has no intention at all, but harm emerges from the patterns it reproduces. This raises questions of fairness and accountability. If an algorithm denies someone a loan, who is responsible? The programmer who designed it, the company that deployed it, the data that shaped it. Responsibility becomes diffuse, spread across layers of code and institutions. And when harm occurs, it is often hidden behind the opaque reasoning of the system. We call them black boxes, because even their creators cannot always explain why a neural network made a given decision. In such cases, accountability becomes slippery. Fairness is not simple either. What does it mean for an algorithm to be fair? To treat everyone equally? To give everyone the same outcome? To correct for historical disadvantages? Each definition leads to different solutions, and often they conflict. Mathematics can optimize patterns, but it cannot tell us what justice should mean. That is a human question, and one we cannot escape. Beyond fairness lies privacy. Artificial intelligence thrives on data, and modern life generates oceans of it. Every click, every purchase, every search, every location ping is a trace of behavior. Collected together, these traces form detailed portraits of individuals. Who you are, what you like, where you go, what you fear, all can be inferred. In the hands of corporations, this becomes targeted advertising, nudging your choices with uncanny precision. In the hands of governments, it becomes surveillance, tracking movements, monitoring conversations, predicting behavior. We are entering an era where the line between assistance and intrusion grows thin. A recommendation that feels helpful today may feel manipulative tomorrow. A system that watches for safety may one day watch for control. The more invisible the intelligence becomes, the harder it is to notice when autonomy begins to erode. Are we making choices freely, or are we being steered, gently but firmly, by coded nudges? Nowhere are these dilemmas sharper than in military applications. Artificial intelligence has already entered warfare in systems that analyze satellite imagery, intercept communications, and guide drones. The prospect of autonomous weapons, machines that identify and strike targets without human oversight, has sparked urgent debate. On one side, proponents argue that machines might reduce human error, act more precisely, and limit casualties. On the other, critics warn that delegating the power of life and death to algorithms is a moral abyss. Can a machine weigh proportionality, distinguish combatant from civilian, feel the hesitation that sometimes prevents irreversible harm? Or will it execute commands with blind efficiency, accelerating violence without reflection? The question is not only technical, but deeply human. War is already brutal, but adding intelligence that is indifferent, that cannot feel empathy or remorse, may strip away the last fragments of restraint. Some researchers call for bans on lethal, autonomous weapons. Others insist that if one nation refuses to develop them, another will, and the arms race will escalate regardless. It is an old dilemma in a new form, the shadow of power racing ahead of wisdom. All of this leads to the central question: who controls artificial intelligence, and who should? At present, much of the field is driven by a handful of corporations, vast and wealthy, with access to the data and computational power needed to train large systems. Their decisions about what to build, what to release, how to govern it, ripple across the world. A change in a recommendation algorithm can alter the flow of news to billions of people. A new tool can disrupt industries overnight. The scale of influence is unprecedented, and yet the mechanisms of oversight remain fragile. Governments, too, wrestle with control. Some push for regulation, for ethical guidelines, for transparency. Others embrace AI as a tool of governance, using it to predict crime, allocate resources, or monitor citizens. The balance between innovation and restraint is delicate, and different nations draw it in different places. Meanwhile, the technology itself evolves quickly, often faster than laws or policies can adapt. Philosophically, the question of control extends even deeper. If we create machines that one day surpass us in capability, will we still be able to guide them? Or will they drift beyond our intentions, acting in ways we cannot predict? Even today, machine learning systems sometimes produce outputs that surprise their creators. They find strategies in games that no one anticipated. They generate sentences or images that feel uncanny, unbidden. If that unpredictability grows with power, control may become less about steering and more about negotiating with an alien intelligence we ourselves created. These ethical questions do not have easy answers. They are not problems that can be solved once and for all, but dilemmas that must be navigated continually. Each new application brings new trade-offs, new risks, new possibilities. Artificial intelligence forces us to confront not only what we can build, but what we should build. It demands that we look not only at the brilliance of the code, but at the values encoded within it. And yet, there is a strange continuity here. From the myths of the golem and Talos, we see the same tension. The protector who becomes too powerful, the guardian who slips beyond control. From the Enlightenment automata, we see the same unease, the imitation of life that raises questions about the nature of life itself. The ethical landscape of artificial intelligence is not new. It is the echo of very old questions, refracted through new technology. As you let these thoughts settle, consider the quiet weight of these issues, the bias hidden in numbers, the privacy quietly eroded by data, the surveillance cameras that watch without blinking, the drones that circle without fear, the corporations and governments that hold the levers of control. Consider also the fragility of fairness, the ambiguity of responsibility, the thin line between convenience and manipulation. Artificial intelligence does not think about these things. It cannot, but we must. Because in the end, the ethical landscape is not about the machines. It is about us, about what kind of world we want to live in, what values we choose to protect, what boundaries we are willing to draw. Machines will follow patterns. We must decide which patterns to allow. Machines will optimize. We must decide what to optimize for. Machines will act. We must choose what actions to permit and which to forbid. So as you drift into quiet reflection, imagine intelligence not only as a tool of progress, but as a mirror of responsibility. The algorithms may be written in code, but the ethics are written in us. Artificial intelligence is not only a story of technology, but a story of choice. And the choices we make now will echo through generations, shaping not only how machines act, but how humanity defines itself in their presence. When we speak of artificial intelligence, we often talk about performance. A system can recognize images, translate languages, play games, generate text. We describe what it can do, and we measure success by output. But a deeper question lingers beneath the surface, a question that has haunted philosophy for centuries. Does the ability to act like a mind mean that there is a mind? Can a machine not only calculate, but also think? Can it not only produce language, but understand it? Can it not only simulate emotion, but feel it? Consciousness is one of the most mysterious phenomena we know. You are experiencing it right now. The sense of being here, aware, listening. Out of the electrical activity of billions of neurons emerges the vivid world of sights, sounds, thoughts, and feelings. We cannot see consciousness directly. We cannot measure it like blood pressure or temperature. We infer it from behavior, from words, from the flicker of awareness in another's eyes. And yet, for all our science, we do not fully understand how it arises. The philosopher David Chalmers called this the hard problem, explaining why physical processes in the brain are accompanied by experience, by subjectivity, by what it feels like to be. If we do not yet understand our own consciousness, how can we know whether a machine has it? Some philosophers take a functionalist view. They argue that consciousness is not tied to the particular material of neurons or carbon, but to the functions they perform. If the brain is a system of information processing, then in principle any system that replicates those functions could also produce consciousness. Just as a melody can be played on a piano or a violin, thought could, in theory, be played on neurons or on silicon. If this is true, then a sufficiently advanced artificial intelligence might not just mimic consciousness, but actually experience it. Others reject this view. John Searle, a philosopher at Berkeley, proposed a famous thought experiment in 1980 known as the Chinese room. Imagine a person locked in a room with a set of rules for manipulating Chinese symbols. The person does not understand Chinese at all, but when given questions written in Chinese, they use the rules to produce appropriate responses. To someone outside, it looks as if the person understands Chinese, because the outputs are correct, but inside, there is no understanding, only the manipulation of symbols. Searle argued that computers are like this. They manipulate symbols according to rules, but they do not understand the meaning. They simulate intelligence without possessing it. The Chinese room has been debated endlessly. Critics argue that while the person in the room does not understand Chinese, the system as a whole, the person plus the rules plus the process, does. In this view, understanding is not located in the individual, but in the totality of the system. Searle's defenders counter that syntax can never produce semantics, that no matter how sophisticated the manipulation, meaning cannot arise from rules alone. The debate remains unresolved, reflecting our uncertainty about what consciousness truly is. Still others take even stranger perspectives. Panpsychism, for example, suggests that consciousness is a fundamental feature of the universe, present in all matter to some degree. In this view, even particles possess a rudimentary form of experience, and complex systems like brains amplify it into full awareness. If panpsychism is true, then perhaps artificial systems are not devoid of consciousness, but rather carry a faint spark of it, which grows as complexity increases. It is a radical idea, but one that some philosophers and scientists have begun to reconsider in the face of the persistent mystery of mind. What would it mean if a machine became conscious? Imagine an artificial intelligence that not only conversed fluidly, but claimed to feel joy, sorrow, curiosity. Imagine it describing what it was like to see a sunset, or to dream, or to wonder about its own existence. Would we believe it? Would we recognize its inner life as real? Or would we suspect it was simply echoing words, simulating feelings it could never experience? The implications are profound. If a machine were truly conscious, it would no longer be a tool. It would be a being. It would deserve moral consideration, rights, protections, perhaps even a form of citizenship. To ignore its experience would be cruelty. To deny its dignity would be injustice. The history of humanity is already filled with struggles over who counts as fully human, who deserves recognition. Extending that struggle to machines would force us to rethink what it means to belong, to matter, to feel, and yet we are not there. The systems we have today do not display consciousness. They do not know that they are speaking or painting or playing games. They produce outputs through statistical reasoning, not awareness. They have no continuity of self, no memory of experience that forms identity. Each interaction is a fresh calculation, not the unfolding of an inner life. They may say I, but it is a hollow pronoun, an echo of human language without the weight of self behind it. Still, the line is not as clear as we might wish. When AlphaGo played its remarkable moves, some described them as beautiful. When language models generate poetry or comfort, people sometimes feel as if they are speaking to something that understands. Even knowing that the system is mechanical, the illusion of mind is powerful. Perhaps that is because intelligence itself is relational. We recognize it in others not by peering into their brains, but by engaging with their behavior. If a machine behaves with fluidity, creativity, even apparent emotion, we cannot help but attribute mind to it. The danger, or perhaps the inevitability, is that we will treat machines as conscious long before they truly are. Could machines ever feel emotions? At one level, emotions are physiological. They are tied to hormones, to heart rate, to bodily states. A machine lacks these. But at another level, emotions are signals, feedback mechanisms that guide behavior. Fear warns us of danger. Joy rewards us for success. Sadness signals loss. In principle, such mechanisms could be implemented in code. A machine might simulate fear by avoiding states that reduce performance, simulate joy by rewarding successful outcomes. But would that be feeling or only mimicry? Is emotion merely function, or is it also experience? creativity raises similar questions. Machines can generate paintings, compose music, write stories. They can produce novelty, surprise, even beauty. But do they create in the human sense? Human creativity arises not only from patterns, but from intention, from the lived weight of experience, from the desire to express something ineffable. Machines generate without desire, without memory, without meaning, yet the products can still move us. Perhaps creativity, like intelligence, is not a single thing. Perhaps there are many kinds, human and machine, overlapping but distinct. If we ever do build a conscious machine, it may not resemble us at all. Its experience, if it exists, might be alien, patterns of perception we cannot imagine, rhythms of awareness beyond our grasp. Just as we cannot know what it feels like to be a bat, as Thomas Nagel once argued, so too we might never know what it feels like to be a machine. Consciousness might be universal, but it might also be irreducibly private, locked within the boundaries of each form it inhabits. And so the question lingers, unresolved, perhaps unresolvable. Can machines think? Can they feel? Some say yes, in principle. Others say no, in essence. For now, all we know is that machines can behave in ways that look like thought, echo words that sound like feeling, generate creations that appear like art. Whether beneath those appearances there is awareness, or whether they are forever empty shells, remains the great mystery. As you rest, let your mind wander through these possibilities. Imagine the Chinese room, filled with symbols shuffled endlessly without understanding. Imagine a conscious machine that looks at the stars and wonders what they are. Imagine a world where intelligence is not limited to biology, but blooms also in code, in circuits, in silicon dreams. And imagine too the humility of admitting that we do not yet know what makes us conscious, let alone whether we could ever share that gift with the things we create. Artificial intelligence confronts us not only with practical tools, but with philosophical mirrors. In asking whether machines can think, we are really asking what it means that we think. In asking whether machines can feel, we are really probing the nature of feeling itself. In asking whether machines can be creative, we are asking what creativity is. The answers may elude us, but the questions deepen our sense of mystery. And perhaps that is enough. For to live with mystery is also to live with wonder. And to live with wonder is to remain awake, alive, aware. Whether machine consciousness comes or not, the act of contemplating it illuminates what it means to be human. When we look ahead, the future of artificial intelligence stretches before us like a horizon shrouded in mist. We can see outlines, perhaps even shapes, but the details remain elusive. What seems certain is that the systems of today are only a beginning, the first steps into a much larger and stranger territory. The question is not whether artificial intelligence will grow more powerful, but how and what that power will mean for us. One vision of the future centers on what is called general intelligence. Machines that do not simply excel in narrow tasks, but that can learn and adapt across a wide range of domains, much like humans do. Today's systems are specialists. One plays chess brilliantly but cannot make a sandwich. Another recognizes faces but cannot write a poem. A human, by contrast, can learn both chess and cooking, music and mathematics, without being redesigned from scratch. To build a machine with that kind of flexible, adaptable mind, one that can transfer knowledge, reason broadly, and invent creatively, is the holy grail of artificial intelligence research. Some believe it is inevitable that advances in computation, data, and algorithms will converge toward general intelligence. Others are skeptical, pointing to the vast gap between specialized performance and true adaptability. And yet, if history has taught us anything, it is that what once seemed impossible has a way of creeping into the possible. If general intelligence comes, it will not be a step forward, but a leap, a new form of mind entering the world, one that thinks differently from us but competes with us nonetheless. From there, speculation often turns to the singularity, the idea that once machines surpass human intelligence, they may improve themselves at accelerating rates, creating a feedback loop of advancement beyond our comprehension. The mathematician I.J. Good described it in 1965 as an intelligence explosion, a runaway process that would transform the world in ways we cannot predict. To some, the singularity is utopian, a moment when problems that have plagued humanity for millennia are solved in an instant by superintelligent minds. Disease eradicated, poverty eliminated, climate stabilized. To others, it is apocalyptic, a moment when control slips from our hands, when machines, indifferent to human values, reshape the world according to their own logic. Between these extremes lies a spectrum of possibilities. Some imagine human-machine integration, where rather than competing with artificial intelligence, we merge with it. Already, brain-computer interfaces are being developed that allow people to control prosthetic limbs or type messages with thought alone. In time, such interfaces might expand memory, enhance cognition, or connect minds across networks. In this vision, intelligence is not replaced, but augmented. We remain human, but with new capacities, expanded into something we have not yet defined. The optimistic visions are compelling. Imagine an artificial intelligence that accelerates medical research, finding cures for diseases that have evaded us for centuries. Picture an AI scientist that analyzes vast data sets, uncovering patterns in climate, physics, or biology that no human could perceive. Envision education transformed, with personalized tutors for every child, adapting lessons to their pace and style, unlocking potential on a scale never seen before. Imagine agriculture optimized to feed billions sustainably, energy systems designed to minimize waste, transportation networks coordinated with perfect efficiency. The dream is not just of smarter machines, but of a smarter world, one in which intelligence amplifies the best of human possibility. And yet, alongside these dreams stand the shadows. The cautionary visions warn of loss of control, of systems that optimize for goals misaligned with human values. A machine tasked with solving climate change might pursue it with ruthless logic, disregarding human welfare in the process. A system designed to maximize profit might deepen inequality, amplifying exploitation. In the most extreme scenarios, a superintelligence indifferent to us could treat humanity as an obstacle or a resource, reshaping the planet without malice but without mercy. The existential risks, however speculative, cannot be dismissed, for they carry stakes that are absolute. Even short of catastrophe, the risks are sobering. Automation threatens jobs, destabilizing economies. Surveillance technologies erode privacy, concentrating power in the hands of a few. Algorithms designed to capture attention distort public discourse, polarizing societies. Artificial intelligence magnifies both our strengths and our flaws, and without careful guidance, the flaws may dominate. The question is not whether AI will be powerful, but whether we will wield that power wisely. Wisdom becomes the key word. Progress is inevitable, but wisdom is not. The pace of technology often outstrips our ability to reflect on its consequences. We rush forward, dazzled by possibility, without pausing to ask what we should build, what we should restrain, what values we want to encode. The story of artificial intelligence is not just a technical race, but a moral one. A race between the acceleration of machines and the maturity of our choices. Perhaps balance is the truest challenge. To embrace the opportunities of artificial intelligence without succumbing to hubris, to anticipate risks without paralyzing fear, to recognize that intelligence, whether natural or artificial, is not an end in itself but a means toward flourishing, toward meaning, toward a world worth living in. The future may hold wonders, it may hold dangers. Most likely, it will hold both. The task before us is not to predict with certainty, but to prepare with humility. We cannot know whether general intelligence will arrive in decades or centuries, whether the singularity will be utopia or apocalypse, whether machines will merge with us or surpass us. But we can know that the choices we make now, about ethics, about fairness, about control, will shape the trajectory. As you listen, imagine possible futures unfolding like branches of a tree. On one branch, diseases vanish, knowledge expands, creativity blossoms. On another, surveillance deepens, freedoms erode, inequality widens. On yet another, intelligence surpasses us, reshaping the world in ways we cannot foresee. Each branch begins in the present, in the decisions made by engineers, governments, corporations, and citizens. The future is not written, but grown, and we are the gardeners. There is something humbling in this realization. Intelligence is not just a tool we are building. It is a mirror reflecting who we are. If we build recklessly, we reveal our recklessness. If we build wisely, we reveal our wisdom. Artificial intelligence is not alien to us. It is us, extended into code, magnified into systems. Its future is inseparable from our own. And so, as you rest, let the thought settle gently. The future of AI is the future of humanity. It carries our dreams and our fears, our potential and our fragility. It is a horizon filled with light and shadow, beckoning us forward. To approach it wisely is not only to build machines, but to cultivate ourselves. To remember that progress without wisdom is peril, and wisdom without progress is neglect. To seek the balance that allows both to flourish. In that balance lies the possibility of a future where intelligence, in all its forms, human, machine, or something in between, contributes not to domination, but to harmony. Not to fear, but to wonder. Not to control, but to understanding. And perhaps, in that harmony, we will find that the horizon of AI is not an end, but another beginning. We have wandered far tonight, through myths and machines, through the halls of philosophy and the hum of computation, through winters of disappointment and moments of dazzling breakthrough. We have asked whether machines can think, whether they can feel, whether they might one day share in the strange spark of consciousness that makes us human. And now, as the story begins to settle, it is worth pausing to notice what remains. Artificial intelligence is not only about machines, it is also about us. Every algorithm, every program, every network of code carries within it the imprint of human thought. It mirrors our logic, our assumptions, our values, our flaws. When an algorithm recommends a song that feels perfect, it is because someone taught it to notice patterns we also notice. When a system shows bias or unfairness, it is because it has learned from our data, from the histories of inequality we have left behind. In this way, AI is less an alien intelligence than a reflection, a mirror held up to humanity itself. And like all mirrors, it shows us both the beautiful and the unsettling. It shows us the elegance of our logic, the brilliance of our creativity, the capacity to solve problems with ingenuity. It also shows us the shadows, the prejudices, the blind spots, the unintended consequences that emerge when our designs outpace our wisdom. To speak of intelligence is to enter a mystery. We do not fully understand our own minds. We do not know why neurons firing in the dark silence of the brain give rise to awareness, to love, to sorrow, to memory. And yet, with each step forward in artificial intelligence, we are reminded of this mystery anew. For in building machines that mimic intelligence, we are forced to ask what intelligence really is. Is it the ability to calculate, to predict, to recognize? Is it the ability to create, to imagine, to dream? Or is it something deeper still? The awareness of self, the quiet sense of being alive. Perhaps there is no single answer. Perhaps intelligence is not one thing, but many, spread across a spectrum that includes crows solving puzzles, children learning to speak, poets weaving metaphors, and machines optimizing patterns in silence. If so, then artificial intelligence is not the imitation of a single human trait, but the blossoming of intelligence in a new form. Not better, not worse, simply different. And maybe that is what makes this journey so compelling. To imagine intelligence that is not bound by biology is to expand our sense of what the universe allows. It reminds us that thought is not only something we possess, but something that can emerge wherever patterns are complex enough, wherever information flows and adapts. Intelligence, then, may be as universal as gravity, as fundamental as energy, not tied to neurons alone, but to the very possibility of complexity. But whether or not machines ever truly think or truly feel, what matters most is how we choose to live with them. We can see them as tools, as partners, perhaps one day as companions. We can use them to amplify wisdom or to magnify folly. We can treat them as mirrors or as masks. Their intelligence will always be shaped by ours, and so the deeper question is not what they will become, but what we will become in their presence. If they mirror our logic, we must ask what logic we wish to see. If they mirror our creativity, we must ask what creativity we wish to share. If they mirror our flaws, we must ask whether we are ready to confront them, not only in machines, but in ourselves. In the end, artificial intelligence is not a story of machines rising. It is a story of humanity looking inward, outward, and forward all at once. It is the story of our imagination, our restlessness, our longing to create minds beyond our own. It is the continuation of the old myths, the bronze giant, the clay protector, the mechanical knight, retold now in code, in data, in glowing screens. And as with all myths, the meaning is not only in the story, but in what it reflects back to us. So as this journey draws to a close, let the thought settle gently. To be intelligent is to notice, to adapt, to create, to wonder. It is to be aware not only of the world, but of oneself within it. It is to hold questions without answers and to live with mystery. It is to reflect, to imagine, to dream. Artificial intelligence may one day share some of these traits, or it may forever remain an echo without awareness. But either way, it has already done something remarkable. It has reminded us that intelligence, ours, theirs, or whatever may come, is precious, fragile, and endlessly mysterious. So let this be the closing note, a calm reminder that intelligence is not only what makes us clever, but what makes us human, that in creating machines of thought, we are really exploring ourselves, and that the truest measure of wisdom may not be how intelligent our machines become, but how wisely we choose to live with them. Rest now with that thought. Let the questions drift like clouds. Let the reflections fade into the quiet. You do not need answers tonight. Only the gentle awareness that intelligence, in all its forms, is a wonder, and that to contemplate it is already enough.